Story 1. The Man Who Wasn't There. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning. Or at least, it should have been. Clara lived on the 9th floor of a quiet apartment building tucked away in the city's West End. Her mornings were always the same. Wake at 7 o'clock. Coffee by 7:15. Out the door by 7:45. She was a creature of routine, and she liked it that way. On this particular morning, the air in the hallway felt unusually still. No distant sounds of neighbors getting ready. No soft hum of plumbing through the walls. Just silence. Too much silence. She shrugged it off, locked her door behind her, and headed toward the elevator at the end of the corridor. She pressed the call button. A quiet ding, followed by the mechanical whirring of the lift arriving. But when the doors slid open, Clara froze. Inside stood a man. He wore a gray suit, neatly pressed, not a wrinkle in sight. His black shoes were polished to a mirror shine. He had no bags, no phone, no keys. Just standing, motionless, expressionless. His eyes didn't shift. He didn't blink. He didn't even appear to be breathing. Clara hesitated. Something about him felt wrong. Not threatening, exactly. Just off. Like when your brain registers a dream as real, but something inside you knows it's not. Still, she was running late. She took a deep breath and stepped in beside him, giving a small, polite nod that went completely unacknowledged. She pressed the button for the lobby. Nothing happened. No hum of the engine. No downward motion. Just stillness. The digital floor display above flickered slightly but didn't change. The numbers stayed frozen on 9. She could feel her pulse now, louder in her ears than she liked. She glanced at the man again. He hadn't moved. Not even an inch. But something else made her stomach drop. The mirrored wall inside the elevator reflected everything clearly. Her coat, her purse, the silver panel of buttons. But not the man. Where his reflection should have been, there was nothing. Just empty space. Clara's throat tightened. Without a word, she stepped out, slowly, calmly, trying not to show fear. The moment both her feet crossed the threshold, the elevator doors slid shut behind her with a whispering clunk. She heard it descend. Alone now, standing in the hallway, she stared at the elevator display as it ticked down. 8, 7, 6. Shaken, she decided to take the stairs. Her entire day felt a little off after that. People at work said she looked pale. She told them it was just a bad night's sleep. But that evening, the unease returned. She couldn't let it go. She needed to know what or who she saw. So she went to the front desk and asked to see the morning's elevator footage. The building manager, an older man with kind eyes, agreed. Together, they reviewed the tape. There was Clara standing in the hallway, pressing the elevator button. The doors opened. She stepped in. She stood alone. The man in the gray suit was never there. She replayed it, over and over, even slowed it down. Clara looked visibly nervous on camera, but the elevator was completely empty. The manager leaned in, squinting. "You sure you weren't just dreaming this?" She didn't respond, because in that moment, she noticed something else, something far worse. Just before she stepped off the elevator, Her reflection in the mirrored wall turned to look at her. But she didn't. And the moment she exited, her reflection smiled. Story 2. The Looping Stranger. Adam liked routine. After long hours at the office, his favorite ritual was an evening walk around his quiet neighborhood. The suburb he lived in was almost too perfect. Trimmed hedges, evenly spaced driveways, identical mailboxes. Some might call it boring, but for Adam, it was calming, familiar. This particular evening, the sky was painted in soft shades of lavender and gray. The sun had just dipped below the rooftops, leaving the streets in a gentle twilight. He walked the usual route, turned right past the park, then left near the cul-de-sac. That's when he saw the man. Tall, lean, wearing a faded blue windbreaker and a dark baseball cap pulled low over his brow. His hands were stuffed into his jacket pockets. His stride was casual, like someone out for the same kind of stroll. As they passed each other on the sidewalk, the man gave a polite nod. Adam nodded back. No reason to think twice about it. He continued walking. 2 minutes later, another corner. And there, coming toward him again, was the same man. Same face, same jacket, same low cap, same nod. Adam stopped in his tracks. He turned around slowly, half expecting to see the man behind him from their first encounter. But the sidewalk was empty. He frowned, trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was just someone who looked similar. A neighbor doubling back. Coincidence. Still, a knot formed in his stomach. To shake the feeling, Adam picked up his pace and made an extra turn off his normal path. He cut through a side street, crossed over a small pedestrian bridge, and looped around a row of houses he didn't usually pass. And yet, as he came around the next corner, heart just beginning to settle. There he was again. Same blue jacket, same cap. But this time, the man smiled. Not a friendly smile. Knowing one. As if he recognized Adam. As if he was waiting for him. Then the man turned the corner up ahead and disappeared from view. Adam, pulse now hammering in his ears, ran. He sprinted to the same corner, certain he'd catch the man mid-step, or at least see him further down the sidewalk. But the street was empty. Totally empty. There were no side alleys, no gates, no cars pulling away. Just the long, quiet road, and a silence that now felt unnatural. Even the usual sounds of the neighborhood were gone. No TVs through open windows. No barking dogs. No insects. Just stillness. And something else. A strange, low-frequency hum, like static, barely audible, but present, vibrating in the back of his skull. He rubbed his ears, blinked, tried to convince himself he was imagining it. Adam walked home quickly, glancing behind him every few steps. He never saw the man again. That night, as he tried to sleep, the image of the man's smile played over and over in his mind. It didn't feel like coincidence. It felt like a loop, script playing on repeat. And he wondered, was the man watching him walk in circles? Or was he the one glitching? Story 3. The phone call that never happened. Lena had always loved the countryside. Every summer as a child, her parents would send her off to spend 2 weeks with her grandmother in a small, quiet village nestled between rolling hills and dense pine forests. There were no supermarkets, No buses, and certainly no Wi-Fi. It was a place untouched by time, and that's what made it so peaceful. Now in her late 20s, Lena hadn't visited in years. But after a difficult breakup and the stress of city life piling up, she decided to take a short trip back. The village was just as she remembered. Dusty roads, the distant sound of cows, the scent of wildflowers drifting through open windows. Her grandmother's home was a modest cottage, stone walls, slanted roof, and a front porch covered in ivy. Inside, it smelled like old books and lavender. Warm, familiar. On the second night, after dinner and herbal tea, Lena curled up in the parlor with a worn paperback. Her grandmother had gone to bed early. Outside, a storm had started to build, lightning flashing behind the hills, low rumbles of thunder in the distance. Then, cutting through the silence, rearing. The old rotary phone on the hallway table let out a loud, mechanical ring. It was so sudden, so out of place in the quiet cottage, that Lena nearly dropped her book. She stood up slowly, walked to the phone, and hesitated before picking up the receiver. Hello? There was a crackle, then a pause, and then a voice. Small, thin, like a child whispering through static. Don't go to the river tomorrow. Lena blinked. I'm sorry. What? But the line had already gone dead. The dial tone returned. A low hum. Then silence. She stood there for a moment, unsure if she'd imagined it. The storm outside crackled faintly. The house was still. She gently set the receiver back in place and walked upstairs to her grandmother's room. Grandma, she whispered, nudging her awake. Someone just called. A child? Her grandmother sat up, frowning. On the landline? She asked. Lena nodded. Her grandmother gave a puzzled look, then gestured to the hallway. That phone hasn't worked in over 10 years. It's not even connected to anything anymore. Lena stared at her. But I answered it. I heard someone. A little girl or a boy. Her grandmother stood, walked with her to the hallway, and lifted the phone cord. It was completely unplugged. The plug hung limply beside the wall jack. Dust clung to the coil. Lena didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, the sky had cleared. The air smelled fresh after the storm, and birds chirped as if nothing unusual had happened. But Lena couldn't shake the phone call from her mind. Who was that child? How did the phone ring? And why did they warn her not to go to the river? By noon, her curiosity got the better of her. She slipped on her boots and took the narrow trail that led from behind the house toward the river. The path twisted through the woods, thick with moss, shaded by trees older than memory. As she approached the final bend before the riverbank, she heard a sound above her. A sharp crack. Instinctively, she stopped. Thwomp. A massive tree limb came crashing down, splintering the earth just a few feet in front of her. She gasped, stumbling backward, heart pounding in her chest. The limb was easily the size of a telephone pole. If she'd taken even one more step, it would have landed squarely on her. She stood there shaking, staring at the broken branches, realizing how close she had come. Whoever had called had saved her life. She rushed back to the cottage, breathless. The phone sat silently on the hallway table, still unplugged, still covered in dust. She stared at it for a long time, half waiting, half hoping that it would ring again. But it never did. And to this day, Lena doesn't know who or what warned her. But sometimes, in the stillness of the night, she swears she hears the faint click of the rotary dial turning on its own. Story 4. The Shadow in the Mirror. Daniel had just moved into a new apartment. It wasn't anything fancy. One bedroom, hardwood floors, a tiny kitchen that smelled faintly of old garlic no matter how many times he wiped the counters. But it was his, and that mattered more than anything. The place had charm, crown molding, a crooked window that overlooked the city, and in the bathroom, an old antique mirror built right into the wall above the sink. Ornate brass frame, slightly tarnished, probably original to the building. He liked the look of it at first. It gave the place character. But from the very first night, something felt off. It wasn't obvious, just a subtle feeling, like the mirror was somehow too reflective. The light caught in it strangely, and sometimes, when he walked by, he thought he saw movement in it when nothing around him had shifted. He chalked it up to being tired, stressed from unpacking, maybe just letting his imagination run wild. That is, until the fourth night. He was brushing his teeth before bed. The bathroom was quiet, lit by a single soft bulb overhead. He leaned over the sink, rinsed his mouth, and when he stood upright, he caught a flash of something behind him in the mirror. A shadow. He spun around, heart suddenly pounding. Nothing. The bathroom door was open, leading to his bedroom. It was dark, silent. Not a sound in the apartment. He told himself it was a trick of the light. Maybe the hallway lamp flickered. Maybe it was just him moving too quickly. Still, he left the light on that night. The next night, it happened again. Only this time, the shadow was clearer. It appeared just over his shoulder, tall and narrow, not shaped like him, not matching his posture or position. Just standing behind him, watching. He turned quickly. Again, the room behind him was empty. But his stomach dropped, because when he turned back to the mirror, the shadow was gone. His reflection, however, looked slightly delayed, like it was catching up to him a moment too late. He moved his hand slowly. The reflection followed, but not quite in sync. He blinked once. The mirror blinked back half a second later. That night, he barely slept. The following evening, he decided to test it. He stood in front of the mirror for 10 full minutes, unmoving, just watching. Nothing happened. He leaned forward, nose nearly touching the glass. Then, for a split second, he saw it again. The shadowy figure just behind him, closer than before. Its head tilted slightly to one side. Daniel turned, but again, no one there. His heart was thudding now, skin crawling. He reached out and slowly placed his palm against the mirror. The glass was warm. Not from the room, not from the lights. Radiating warmth, like a living surface, like something was just on the other side of it, breathing. He jerked his hand away. His reflection didn't. It kept its hand on the glass. And then his reflection blinked. Before he did. That night, Daniel covered the mirror with a towel. He duct-taped the edges, pushed a chair in front of it, turned off the bathroom light, and shut the door. But the feeling didn't go away. In bed, he could still feel it, a presence, a pressure, like something on the other side of the mirror was disappointed, like it had been so close. That night, he dreamed of a version of his bathroom identical, but reversed. In it, his reflection was no longer mirroring him. It moved on its own, smiling, watching. And in the dream, Daniel reached out to touch the mirror. And this time, the reflection pulled him through. He woke up gasping. For weeks, he avoided the mirror. He showered at the gym, brushed his teeth in the kitchen, told friends he was just renovating. Eventually, he tried to remove the mirror entirely, but it was sealed into the wall. No screws, no backing, just fused into the plaster like it had always been there, like it was meant to stay. To this day, the towel remains, but every few weeks it falls, no matter how tightly he tapes it. And sometimes, in the dead of night, when he passes the bathroom door, he hears it. A soft tap, tap, tap from the other side of the glass. Story 5. The Other Me. It started like any other weekend errand. Natalie had stopped by her neighborhood grocery store after work on a quiet Sunday afternoon. It was one of those older, family-run shops, smaller aisles, warm lighting, and the comforting smell of fresh bread always lingering near the entrance. She wasn't in a rush. She wandered slowly down the aisles, ticking off the items on her mental list. Cereal, milk, pasta, a bottle of red wine for the weekend. Everything was normal. Until she turned into aisle 6. That's when she saw her. Not someone similar. Not a look-alike. Same coat. Same hairstyle. Same gray scarf knotted just the way she wore it. Same exact purse. The little leather crossbody with the worn brass buckle. A scuff mark on the side that she recognized instantly. The other Natalie stood just a few feet away, chatting casually with one of the store clerks near the canned goods section. Natalie froze, heart slamming against her ribs. For a moment, her brain scrambled to explain what she was seeing. Was it a mirror? No mirror there. A prank? A hallucination? A twin she didn't know about? The other Natalie laughed. Her laugh tilted her head the way she did, and gestured toward a shelf. Natalie ducked behind the nearest end cap, peeking carefully between the soup cans. And then, silence. She peeked again. Gone. The aisle was empty. Just the clerk still standing there, stacking some cans, as if nothing strange had happened. Natalie rushed over, heart still racing. "Excuse me," she asked breathlessly. "That woman you were just talking to. Where did she go?" The clerk blinked, looked at her like she'd asked something absurd. "I'm sorry," he said. "You were just here. You asked me about the canned tomatoes." Natalie frowned. "No, I wasn't. I was on the other side of the store. I just got here." The clerk's expression changed, his face draining of color slightly. He stared at her. "Ma'am, you were right here." You pointed to that exact shelf. Natalie looked down. Her hand was shaking. She turned and walked out of the aisle, through the store, and back to the entrance, each step heavier than the last. The automatic doors slid open. She stood just outside and looked back. What if she hadn't hidden? What if she had walked up and spoken to her copy? What would have happened? Would something have snapped? Would one of them have vanished? That night, Natalie barely slept. Her dreams were fractured, mirror-like. In each one, she was standing across from herself in strange places: train stations, dark rooms, silent parks. Each time, the other version of her would speak in a voice just slightly too slow, slightly too calm. "You shouldn't have seen me," one of them whispered. In the weeks that followed, she tried to rationalize it. Maybe it had been a coincidence. Maybe it was someone who just looked like her from behind. But deep down, she knew it hadn't just looked like her. It was her. Every detail, every gesture, down to the scar on her left knuckle from a childhood fall. 2 months later, she passed by that same store, just walking by. But as she glanced through the front window, her blood ran cold. There, by the produce section, she saw herself again. Only this time, her copy wasn't shopping. She was staring straight out the window, directly at her. Expressionless, unblinking. Natalie turned and walked away without looking back. She never returned to that store. Sometimes, late at night, she wonders, was it a glitch? A time loop? A version of herself from another dimension? Or worse, was she the copy? And the real Natalie had been watching from the other side all along. Story 6. The Man Who Knew My Name. Sarah was used to traveling alone. Her job as a regional consultant often took her to remote towns, small businesses, and long stretches of highway. She didn't mind the solitude. In fact, she found peace in it. Long drives gave her time to think. Small towns gave her stories to remember. One Thursday afternoon, nearing dusk, she found herself on a winding back road in a part of the state she didn't recognize. Her GPS had rerouted her off the main highway due to construction, leading her through pine forests and long-forgotten farmland. After an hour of quiet driving, her stomach began to growl. She hadn't eaten since breakfast. That's when she saw it. A small roadside diner, nestled beneath a flickering neon sign that read, Edna's Place, Home-Style Eats. The parking lot was nearly empty, save for an old pickup truck and a dusty red sedan. Sarah pulled in. The diner was straight out of another decade: vinyl stools, checkered floors, and a jukebox that looked like it hadn't played a song since the 80s. The scent of fried food and stale coffee hung in the air. She slid onto a bar stool at the counter, setting her purse down beside her. From the kitchen doorway emerged a middle-aged man in a grease-stained apron. He had kind eyes, a gray stubble, and a slightly crooked smile. He looked at her. Then his eyes lit up with recognition. "Well, hey there," he said warmly. "Welcome back, Sarah." She froze. "Excuse me," the man chuckled, wiping his hands on a towel. "Don't tell me you forgot me already. You were just here last week. Sat in that very same seat. Even had the grilled cheese with black coffee, just like always." Her heart skipped. "I'm sorry, but I've never been here before," she said slowly. "I'm not even from around here." The man tilted his head slightly, still smiling, but now with a puzzled edge. "Strange. You even had the same coat on." Sat quiet, stared out the window, paid in cash. Sarah forced a polite laugh, though the chill crawling down her spine was anything but amused. "Must have been someone who looked like me." The man didn't respond, just kept wiping his hands, eyes still on her, watching. She didn't stay long. Ordered nothing. just muttered an excuse about needing to get back on the road and left a few bills on the counter. As she pulled away, she glanced at the GPS on her phone. The location pin showed no record of the stop. The app hadn't even registered that she'd exited the highway. A week later, on her way home, her route, again rerouted, brought her back through the same back road. And once again, the glowing neon sign appeared through the trees. Edna's place. She hadn't planned on stopping, but something in her itched for closure. She pulled in, parked in the same spot. Inside, the diner looked exactly as before, except the energy was different. Quieter, dimmer, a strange tension in the air. Behind the counter was a different man. Younger, thin, nervous eyes. Sarah approached the counter cautiously. "Hi," she said. "Is the other cook here?" "The one who was working last week." The man blinked. "I'm the only one who works the counter." "No, last time I came here, there was an older guy. Gray hair, beard, called me by my name." He looked even more confused. "Ma'am, I've been the only one here for months, maybe even longer. I'm here open to close, 7 days a week. I'd know if someone else was working." Sarah stared at him. "You're telling me there's no one else? No other cook? Not even in the kitchen?" He stepped aside and gestured. The kitchen was empty. No footsteps, no voices, no grease-stained apron hanging on a hook. Just stillness. Sarah sat in her car for nearly 10 minutes before starting the engine. As she pulled back onto the road, she glanced in the rearview mirror. The neon sign flickered, then went dark. That night, back in her hotel room, she tried to explain it away. Maybe she'd imagined it. Maybe she was overtired. Maybe the man had simply played a joke on her, though she couldn't imagine why. But when she took out the crumpled receipt from her purse, her blood ran cold. There, scrawled in faded ink, was a short message. "See you soon, Sarah." No signature. No date. No total. Just those 4 words. She never returned to that part of the state again. Story 7. The Silent Neighborhood. It was just past 1 a.m. when Kevin left the party. He wasn't drunk, just tired. The kind of tired that made the night feel slower than it was. The kind of tired where the roads stretch longer than they should and the silence starts to ring in your ears. He'd taken a route he didn't usually use, a series of suburban side streets that wound through a development on the outskirts of town. Quiet, cookie-cutter homes, manicured lawns, and cul-de-sacs that looked like they'd been copied and pasted from a brochure. It was supposed to be a shortcut. It ended up being something else. As he turned off the main road and into the neighborhood, the first thing he noticed was the stillness. Not the regular kind of suburban quiet, an unnatural stillness. There was no wind. No rustling of trees. No dogs barking from backyards. No hum of distant traffic or late-night sprinklers. Even his tires seemed to roll quieter than usual, as if the pavement had somehow absorbed the sound. He passed one house, then another, then another. Every single one had their lights on. Not just a porch light or a bedroom lamp. Every room, every window, fully lit. Yet, not a single person in sight. No silhouettes behind curtains. No flickers of movement. No TVs glowing blue in the background. Just houses, lit up like a stage, but with no actors. He slowed at a stop sign, glancing down each street. Same pattern. Bright houses, perfect lawns, no life. A feeling crept in, one that tightened his chest and made his fingers twitch against the steering wheel. It felt like the world had paused, like a simulation waiting for a command. And then he saw it, out of the corner of his eye, in a front yard across the street, a child on a swing. A small figure, maybe 7 or 8, dressed in pajamas, seated on a plastic swing suspended from an oak tree branch, swaying gently, back and forth, back and forth. Kevin turned his head slowly. That's when the real chill set in. The swing's chains weren't moving. They hung perfectly still. No clinking, no shifting. And the child was frozen mid-swing, feet angled forward, hair lifted slightly, head turned toward the house. Not blinking, not breathing, just hanging there, caught in motion like a paused video frame. Kevin's pulse spiked. His foot slammed down on the gas. The car surged forward, wheels spinning slightly on the smooth asphalt. He didn't look back. Not once. Not even as the houses passed in a blur of light and stillness. It wasn't until he hit the main road again that the world seemed to return to normal. Wind brushed the car. He heard distant traffic. A dog barked somewhere far off. But he didn't feel normal. He felt watched. The next morning, Kevin couldn't stop thinking about what he'd seen. He needed to prove to himself it was real, or at least understand it. So he drove back. Same route. Same turnoff. But there was no neighborhood. Where the paved streets should have been, there was only dense forest. No houses. No street signs. No mailbox clusters or sidewalks. Just trees. Tall, old, and silent. As if the neighborhood had never been there at all. For weeks afterward, Kevin obsessed over maps, online records, satellite images. There was nothing. No trace of construction, no zoning permits, no aerial photos showing even a hint of the houses he'd seen. When he tried to describe it to friends, they laughed, called it sleep deprivation or stress. But he knew what he'd seen. The lights, the stillness, the child frozen in midair. And sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet again, Kevin drives. He takes different back roads, looks for that turnoff, just to see. But he never finds it. Not yet. Though sometimes, when he's passing through unfamiliar towns, he catches a glimpse of brightly lit windows, deep in the trees. Waiting. Story, the book that changed itself. Ellie had always found comfort in books. There was something soothing about curling up with a familiar story, letting the world around her dissolve as the pages turned. When life felt chaotic, novels gave her structure. And there was one book in particular that had always stayed with her. A fantasy epic she'd read twice already. A sweeping story of courage, loss, and sacrifice. The kind of book that breaks your heart and still leaves you thankful for the journey. She remembered every beat of the plot. How the hero, a quiet, reluctant warrior, gives his life to save the kingdom. How the final chapter ends with a quiet funeral, a single white flower placed on his grave, and the last line. Some endings aren't happy, but they're still worth telling. That line had haunted her for years. In a good way. So when she found herself struggling with insomnia one night, she pulled the book off her shelf, turned on a reading lamp, and decided to revisit it for a third time. She settled into her blanket, the soft rustle of pages comforting. But by chapter 10, something felt wrong. The hero, Michael, wasn't behaving the way she remembered. He was colder, less noble. He made decisions that felt out of character. She figured she'd misremembered. Maybe the years had blurred the details. But then she reached the final chapters. Michael didn't sacrifice himself. In fact, he wasn't even there. The climax unfolded around a completely different character, a woman named Adrienne, someone who'd played a minor role in the version Ellie remembered. Now, she was leading armies, making choices, driving the story forward. Ellie flipped back through the pages, confused. Whole sections were different. Subplots had been rearranged. Names she didn't recognize. Towns that didn't exist in the original. She turned to the inside cover. Same edition. Same cover art, blue with silver embossing. Same dog-eared pages. Same coffee stain on chapter 3. She pulled out an old receipt she'd used as a bookmark. It was dated 2 years ago. She remembered that day. She'd bought the book at a local shop while traveling and finished it within the week. But this was not the same story. Not even close. Unable to shake the unease, she called her friend Melissa the next morning, someone who had read the book around the same time as her. "Do you remember how it ends?" Ellie asked. "Yeah," Melissa said without hesitation. "Michael dies saving the girl. He falls into the chasm with the artifact." "Why?" Ellie swallowed hard. "And the last line?" Melissa paused for a moment, then repeated it. "Some endings aren't happy, but they're still worth telling." Ellie stared down at the book in her lap. That line was gone. In its place, the final page now ended with something new. Single sentence. "You're not supposed to notice." She didn't sleep that night. She kept the book beside her bed, glancing at it every so often as if it might move on its own. It didn't. But it didn't feel still either. It had weight now. A presence. The next morning, she opened it again. The story was back. The original story. Michael. The sacrifice. The white flower. Even the final line, the one she remembered, was back. Had she dreamed the other version? Imagined it? Had the stress and insomnia scrambled her memory? She thought about asking Melissa to borrow her copy, to compare side by side. But something deep in her gut whispered, "Don't." A week passed. She left the book on the shelf, untouched. But then, one night, while putting laundry away, she noticed it had moved. It wasn't on the far left side anymore. It sat in the center, tilted forward just slightly, as if it had been pulled and placed back, imperfectly. And on its cover, a faint indentation, as if something had traced a finger across the title. She picked it up, hands trembling. Inside, the first page was blank, except for one sentence, handwritten in shaky ink. "You saw too much the first time." Now, sometimes when she reads any book, new or old, she double-checks every chapter, flips back and forth, just to make sure it hasn't changed. And sometimes, it has. A new character. A scene she swears wasn't there before. An ending that feels almost right, but not quite. She never reads anything twice anymore. Because what if every time you do, the story decides to read you back? Story 9. The Time Sliver. It had been a normal evening. Jamal was home alone, standing barefoot in the kitchen, rinsing dishes after dinner. The air smelled of garlic and cumin. A soft jazz playlist hummed from the speaker on the counter. Outside, the sun was dipping into that golden hour glow where everything looked just a little more beautiful than it should. It was peaceful, familiar, until the plate slipped from his hands. It happened so fast. One moment he was rinsing it under the faucet. The next it was sliding from his wet fingers. Crash! The sound was louder than it should have been. Sharp, cracking, as if it had broken not just on the floor, but through something deeper. And in that instant, time fractured. The world slowed. The fragments of ceramic hung mid-air, suspended like stars in space. The light warped. The sound of jazz twisted, distorted into low, muffled warbles. Jamal blinked, and the world snapped back. He was standing at the sink. The plate was whole again, resting in his hands as if it had never fallen. The faucet was still running. The music played normally. And then, the front door opened. His wife, Maya, stepped inside with grocery bags on both arms. "Hey, I picked up that almond milk you like," she called casually, brushing wind from her hair. Jamal stared at her. She hadn't been home. He was sure of it. She had texted that she'd be back in 30 minutes. He checked the microwave clock. Exactly 30 minutes ago. He looked down at the plate in his hands again. Oh! But it had shattered. Hadn't it? He played it off, helped her unpack the groceries, smiled, nodded. But something inside him pulled, like a thread in the back of his mind unraveling with each second. He didn't say anything that night, didn't mention the plate, didn't mention how, when she walked in, he had already lived the moment before. Instead, he waited, and sure enough, it came again. A week later. Same kitchen, same soft music. This time he was drying a mug. He felt it first, not a thought, but a feeling. A pull in his stomach, a tightness in the air. Then, the mug slipped. Only this time, he was ready. His hand snapped forward, catching it just before it hit the floor. And in that instant, he felt the glitch release. The pressure, as if a loop had been broken. And the world continued, unpaused. Maya walked in 2 minutes later, just as expected. No shift, no rewind. But Jamal couldn't shake the feeling that something had been watching. That the second time around, he had done what he was meant to. Or maybe, what he had failed to do the first time. He never told anyone. How could he? Who would believe that time had rewound, not metaphorically, but literally? That he had relived the same 30 minutes, down to the smallest detail? That the moment he corrected the mistake, time moved forward as if nothing had happened? But sometimes, when he's walking through his house, or pouring coffee, or lacing his shoes, he feels it again. That flicker, that moment of distortion, that almost imperceptible pause in the air. And every time, he wonders, what happens if I don't get it right this time? And worse, how many times have I already failed without knowing? Story 10. The Stranger in My Dream. And my room. It began with a dream so vivid, so tactile, that when Maria woke up, she wasn't entirely sure she'd left it. In the dream, she stood barefoot in a long, dark hallway. The floor was damp, the walls narrow and close. A single flickering light buzzed overhead, casting long shadows that stretched and shivered against peeling wallpaper. It felt like she was underground, or beneath something vast and forgotten. At the far end of the hallway, a figure stepped forward. A man. Tall, thin, skin like wet paper. Eyes hollow and sunken, not black, but absent, like there was nothing behind them at all. He moved without sound, gliding toward her through the dim. And when he was close enough, he leaned in, inches from her face, and whispered in a rasp that wasn't quite a voice. "You forgot me." That's when she woke up, gasping, drenched in sweat, heart pounding as if she had sprinted for miles. But she wasn't alone. At first, she thought it was just the aftershock of the dream, the confusion of waking up in a dark room, her mind still trying to reboot. But then she noticed it. The air felt heavy. Not warm, not cold, just weighted, like something was pressing down on the room itself. A pressure in her chest, her breath shallow. That's when she saw it. A shape darker than the shadows standing by her closet. Not moving, not blinking, just there. She stared at it, frozen, her body locked in place, heart thudding in her ears. Finally, she reached for the lamp. Click. Light flooded the room. The figure was gone. But the closet door, normally shut, was now slightly open. She didn't sleep for the rest of the night, just sat in bed, knees pulled to her chest, eyes on the closet. She told herself it had been sleep paralysis, a lingering nightmare. But it didn't feel like one. It felt like the dream had followed her back. The next morning, while making coffee, her roommate Claire walked into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. "Rough night?" she asked, noticing Maria's pale face and thousand-yard stare. Maria nodded. Had a nightmare. Couldn't really sleep after. Claire reached for a mug, yawning. "Weird. I thought I saw someone in your room last night." Maria froze. "What do you mean?" Claire shrugged casually. "I woke up around 3. I saw a guy standing in your doorway. Just figured your boyfriend was staying over." Maria's throat went dry. I don't have a boyfriend," she said quietly. Claire looked up, confused. "Then who?" She stopped. They both stood there, suddenly still. The hum of the fridge the only sound in the room. That day, Maria searched every corner of her room. Checked under the bed, in the closet, behind furniture. Nothing. But the feeling stayed. That heaviness, that subtle sense of being watched. She threw out the old dream catcher hanging by her window. Started sleeping with the lights on. Bought sage, crystals, a noise machine. Nothing helped. Because it wasn't just the dream anymore. It happened again a week later. Same hallway. Same flickering light. But this time, the man didn't speak. He just stood there, arms at his sides, staring. And behind him, dozens of doors lined the walls, each one slowly opening, each revealing her. Different versions of herself. One sobbing, one screaming, one completely still, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She woke up choking, heart skipping beats, reaching for the lamp, but it was already on. And the closet door, wider this time. Sometimes Maria tries to convince herself it's just stress, that dreams bleed into reality when you don't sleep enough, that her roommate probably saw shadows, that her mind is creating things that aren't there. But some nights, she wakes up to the sound of her closet door creaking open, inch by inch, even though she locked it before bed. And sometimes, she swears she can see that same tall, pale man, standing just beyond the edge of the door, whispering words she can't quite hear. Not yet. She started sleeping on the couch, but it didn't help, because wherever she goes, the dream finds her. And every time, the hallway grows longer, and the man takes one step closer.